Hey there, welcome to Somewhat Overfitting, the podcast about data science and digital transformation. My name is Jonas, and every week I'm interviewing people in the data science field on how they use data in their day-to-day business life. Today I'm talking to Jetta Hansen, data analyst at Nav Inc. in Salt Lake City. First about Nav, they are offering an app where they connect small business owners with financing opportunities. Here they use data science to find the best fitting options. Nav also provides educational resources to help small business owners understand and navigate the world of business financing. Jetta did a bachelor's degree in strategic communication and then worked in that field for 6 years before deciding to do a master's in business analytics in a program that she actually helped to launch. Jetta is working mainly with user data of Nav's app. We talked about how the data team is set up at Nav, what kind of data they work with, and what the outcome of their work is. We then talked about the data-driven culture at the company and how the management is measuring the value of the data team's work. In the end, Jetta described her challenges when coming from a different field and starting out in data science and what tools she mainly uses to do her job. So, let's get started. So, Jetta, thanks so much for joining today. You are a data analyst at Nav Inc., which provides financial products and services. And before we dive into what you are doing there, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Thank you so much for having me. Absolutely. So I have a fairly diverse professional background. I did my undergraduate degree in strategic communications and then started working in higher education in business graduate program, recruitment, admissions, and marketing. So I worked kind of in the marketing of business graduate programs for about 6 years. And that was at the University of Utah. And while I was doing that, I actually helped launch a new program, the Master of Science in Business Analytics program. So I admitted and recruited the first class for that and then managed the marketing for it for about 3 years before I actually became a student in the program myself.
That's great.
Yeah, so I was working in marketing and just had a desire to improve my analytics skills. So pursued that graduate program. And through education was just opened up to a whole new world of data and analytics that I hadn't been exposed to before. So that was really neat. I finished the program last December, so December 2019. And right before I graduated, I started working at Nav, as you mentioned.
Great. So that's interesting that you basically started the program, which I'm in as well. My background is actually as well in marketing and more like the strategic part and like the branding part of marketing. Are you right now more a marketing analyst, or what is your current position? What are you doing?
So at Nav, I'm a data analyst, and I do work closely with our marketing team, but I work with many other teams in the organization as well. So my role kind of has two components to it. Mm-hmm. Part of it is the actual analyzing of data. So, if people have questions or want to find out something about our customers or track trends, then I can dive into our data and try and find some insights for them. So that's the analyzation part. And then the other part is more of database architecture and helping to maintain our database and data warehouse. So as we get new data sources coming in, we need to build tables for that data to live in and, kind of all the ETL and getting the data from its source into our database where we can begin to work with it. So I work on that side as well.
Great. So how big is your team? Are you the only data analyst, or is it more like a department like with 5 people, or how's that set up?
So I'm part of our business intelligence team and our BI team, and we have 4 data analysts, and then our team leader or manager, and then we also work closely with our data engineering team. So in total, business intelligence and data engineering, and then some of our Salesforce team as well joins in. That's maybe about 12 people.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain a little bit how the whole team is set up? And can you describe maybe like the workflow in that team?
The workflow of our data org is like such. So the data engineers help get data into our organization from its source. So we have a lot of different sources of how data is coming in, and they basically set up those pipelines and build the appropriate things for the data to be able to come in, whether it's into our data warehouse or into Salesforce, things like that. So they are upstream from us on the business intelligence side. So BI sits downstream of data engineering, where we're more responsible for making sure the data has a place to live in the data warehouse and maintaining like a clean architecture structure. And then we work more with the stakeholders to help serve their data needs. So the business intelligence team actually works with every department in our organization, and we just provide whatever data or analysis they need.
So what kind of data do you use? You said you work closely with the marketing department, so probably like some advertisement data from Facebook and such. And then on the other side, the user data from the app?
I work with all kinds of data, exactly like you mentioned. Yeah. So I don't work directly with our marketing or campaign data as much. I work more, I would say, with customer data and how kind of customers are flowing through the sign-up process and what sources they're coming from. Additionally, we have data about the customers themselves and their businesses. And then we also have access to some data that's more relevant to business financing. So I can work with that as well, just depending on what the stakeholder needs to do.
Yeah. You're getting the request from your department. So it sounds like you are working internally on kind of like a project basis. So you get a project in form of a question. We want to find out how the user uses the app when they start to convert into a paying customer or a higher stake customer. And you would get the request, and then you would take the data out of your database, data warehouse, and then start to analyze it. Would the outcome be a dashboard?
Some of the common questions we get are more about tracking things over time. So if someone's wanting to know customer behavior and how that looks over a few months and eventually, over a few years, that would definitely result in a dashboard that's dynamic and updating, because part of our job as a data analyst is to provide our users with data that they can access and consume whenever they need to, so that they're not ever held back by like needing to go through a data analyst to know results or certain metrics that they're looking for. So typically that's most of the projects that I work on are to track trends, and in which case I would usually build a dashboard to help the stakeholder do that. On occasion, we do get kind of quicker. Someone just needs a quick analysis, a quick, number of things here, or customers who did something, in which case that might just be more of a static data output where we would just tell them or provide like a Google sheet that then they could analyze themselves or use for whatever they need.
As you're an analyst, so your job is more analyzing the data and not necessarily building models for some case, because it sounds like how Nav uses their data at the moment, a model would not be needed. Or do you also do some prescriptive analysis?
I don't do very much prescriptive analysis at this point, or predictive analysis. I don't build a lot of models in my role. Maybe as it expands, there'll be room for that. But we also have a data scientist who is more responsible for that, because we do use prescriptive analytics and do some modelings and things like that. That is not specifically what I do, however.
Yeah. The head of the department, so I would expect that he's also the one who tries to embrace the use of data in decision making in the companies. Is that the case?
Yes. Our team leader on the BI team, definitely embraces the use of data. And as far as determining the strategic direction and helping kind of infuse data throughout the organization, I would say he, as well as our leader of the data engineering team, and then above us, we have an executive over data engineering and business intelligence. So I would say that's sort of the leadership structure. And they really, just infuse data throughout the organization.
So it sounds like that the organization is really into using data in a way. So you probably have less the problem of getting the stakeholders to use your analytics capacity, I would guess, and the need to embrace the use of data is low, and the trust in the data is probably pretty high.
I feel Nav and my colleagues at Nav have a pretty high trust in data. And they're interested in it. I really, really appreciate that coming from a data side. And I think, like I said, we have 4 data analysts on our team. I don't think we'll ever run out of work.
Do you know how the company or how the leadership team is measuring the value of the data, or are they more in the direction that they know that it works and they don't necessarily put a monetary or timely value on the department?
As data people, I think we're definitely interested, and they are definitely interested in having some metrics to stack against that. One big way we measure the value of data analytics is our stakeholders, and just making sure that they have what they need when they need it as far as data goes to track whatever efforts they're doing. Really, really important. And then more on the data science side, the better and more efficient we can get with our data science, the better and more customers we can connect with really good financing opportunities. So that's how we would measure that there.
So you started in data science in December last year. And did you have any challenges so far?
So yeah, I started my data analyst role in last November. So November 2019, finished the Master of Business Analytics December 2019, and definitely had a lot of challenges transitioning into this role. Number one is my first technical role. And with that kind of comes a lot to learn as you're just sort of getting up to speed on different technologies. And as you mentioned, you were in the same master's program that I did. So you are probably familiar that, all the analyses we did, we sort of just had a CSV file of data that we then cleaned and mined and analyzed. And so for me, I really had to learn the whole data, how data really comes full circle from a source into a data warehouse and a database where it can actually be queried and then analyzed. So really getting up to speed on everything that comes before that CSV file was pretty challenging for me, just because not having experience in that before, I had a lot to learn.
Yeah. What was challenging there? How in my imagination is that you have the data engineering people who are connecting the data sources with the data warehouse, and then it was challenging for you to get the data out of the warehouse into whatever you use to analyze the data.
Yeah, I would say all of the above for me were challenges. I really just didn't know anything about kind of what happens before that CSV file. I just had not exposed to it. And because in the master's program, all the technologies we learned were pretty new. Yeah. It was almost I just didn't quite know to dive deeper until you kind of get in a real business environment where it's dynamic data, new information coming in every day. We need to make sure it comes in the way we want it to, and then access when we need it to, and that it's correct. So just kind of understanding how those processes work and the technologies that funnel them and the people that help create them, understanding how that works in an organization was a lot for me. But as you go on, I have our team's really, really supportive and they're good teachers. So that helped me a lot with getting up to speed.
So how I understand the department, so I'm kind of new to data science as well. So how I understand, the data engineers would prepare the data in a way that the data analyst then could just take it out and analyze it. Is that the case in reality?
So that is I think, as you kind of mentioned, theoretically how things work.
Yeah.
At Nav, between our business intelligence and data engineering team, the lines are blurred a little bit more. And as I mentioned earlier, the BI team is downstream from data engineering. So, we do kind of have to know what's going on upstream of us, just because then we have to report even downstream from us to our stakeholders. For example, if the data was not going to be there for their reports, or if we weren't able to access the most updated data for something they wanted us to analyze. So it is like that. Essentially at this point, I am able to connect to our database, query what's needed, and then analyze it. But we do have to be aware of everything that's happening before then as well.
Okay, and the understanding was challenging for you because it was probably just a lot that you didn't expect in the beginning.
Yeah, totally. For example, I was not familiar with ETL, extract, transform, load, at all. But now I'm like really interested in that and think, that part of the data processing is, and how you make it more efficient and make it work is really, really cool.
Are you able to explain it in some way how it works?
So for our ETL, we do have some tools that help support it. And then we have, most of those tools are run from Python scripts as well. So cool. But yeah, basically the data engineers are responsible for getting the data from its source. That's the extract part. And then transform would be transforming it into a more consumable state, which, like, for example, for us, we try not to work with red data. So a lot of in that transform stage, some like PII gets redacted or other things get hashed or changed just so that we're not interacting with personal information of our customers. And then the load part is the final step of getting it into our database.
Is your part of your analysis job to clean like the data that you extract?
Yeah, and I feel like the data we have coming in is fairly clean. We certainly have to be aware of like missing data, or if we're doing analyses, one thing I always look at is data coverage of the different data points. Because if someone wants to know something specific about a customer, we don't always have good data coverage on it. So, as you start querying it, you might see values pop up, but then maybe that's only 5% of people or something like that.
Okay.
So, yeah.
I can totally relate to the part where you're overwhelmed by something. It's like already in the study, you think like you got something and then you get a new topic, or you go dig deeper and then something new comes up and you're like, what? I thought I got it. And how did you overcome that? You said you had your teammates who helped you. Was it more like a slowly trying to read up on the topic, read some documentations, and then asking questions to the colleagues who have been there longer?
Or is it kind of overcoming that sense of overwhelm at the beginning by, again, just kind of being in this like whole new environment of data from start to end? Definitely the teammates helped a lot. They're really, the people I work with are really, really smart, and they know a lot about data and technology and how all of this works, and a lot about our company. So they're really, really helpful. And as I mentioned earlier, really good teachers. So I really gained a lot from just their support, and still do every day. I did do, some individual study, and, though I'm not in school anymore, there's online courses, YouTube, Google a ton. I try my best to try and like figure things out and get a start on kind of understanding, and then like taking that little bit of information and discussing it with a team member or my boss to better understand. The other thing I would say, or like recommend for new data professionals, is just to be really shameless about the questions you ask. Because again, these people I work with, I feel like they could do some of these processes or setups like in their sleep. And for me, it was brand new. So just kind of being really vulnerable and asking questions that you need to know, like they know you need to know them. And, no one ever made me feel dumb. They just helped me find the answers.
Yeah, that's great. What is something that you wish you would have known before? Maybe ETL, but aside from that.
Yeah, something I wish I would have known before. Is kind of that navigation of a new environment and of learning new things. So I was at my previous job for almost 7 years, and, completely different industry. It was completely different job function. So really coming to Nav for me was a little bit of a culture shock, not in a bad way. It was just very different. So just kind of, I hadn't, started a new job for so long that it was like relearning how to do all that, and then relearning all of these like technical things. Being vulnerable, had someone just kind of like before I started sat me down and said, hey, like it's going to be uncomfortable. You're going to have to ask a lot of questions that like maybe feel really elementary, but you need to just ask them anyways, and really lean on your team for support. I think having some of that advice earlier on would have helped me.
Thanks for sharing that. My last question would be, what are the tools you use in your current role right now?
I use a variety of tools in my role. So number one, I use SQL a ton, all day, every day. to query our database. In the MSBA program, we did learn R quite a lot. We learned a little bit of Python, but mostly R. So I use that on occasion, but there are some analyses, like R has some functions that I just think make data easier to work with than SQL, but I do a lot more in SQL now than I did in the program, just because that's kind of our main interface. Trying to think what else.
Do you use Tableau for visualization? So you go into the database, use SQL to collect the data, and then extract it and load it into Tableau, or whatever you use for your dashboards?
We do use Tableau for our dashboards. Yep. So that was another thing. Had never used Tableau before I started this job, so I had to learn that. But that's been really cool to learn. Have enjoyed using that. Those are the main ones that I use like pretty much every day.
Yeah, which is calming probably for a lot of people who start out and think, oh, they need to know Python, they need to know R, they need to know SQL, and they need to know Spark and whatever is out there. And so that's pretty good to know that it's mainly SQL and Tableau.
Yeah, that makes a really great point that, coming in, and even now I'm like, I need to learn all these like coding languages and these other technologies and things. But that's a great point. Like really my toolkit that I use right now is like fairly small. I do and want and will, expand my skill set, and that will probably expand my toolkit. But yeah, I mean, you can certainly start small. If you just know a couple of things, you can get really good at them. And then once you're more familiar with technology and even like how some programming languages work, it becomes easier to learn other ones. So
yeah, thanks so much for your insight on your job. That was great.
You are welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for today. Thanks for listening, and tune in next week for another episode of Somewhat Overfitting. Thanks again to Jetta for being on the show. Highlights of today's show were the insights into the challenges Jetta faced when starting out and how she overcome them. Also, it is calming to hear that she mainly uses SQL and Tableau every day. This reduces the stress I feel to learn all the tools out there at once. Let me know what you thought about this episode on somewhatoverfitting.com. There you can also find today's show notes. If you have something to say about data science and digital transformation, visit somewhatoverfitting.com/guest and fill out the form. I'm always looking for interesting conversations. The theme song is called Everything You Wanted from Dan Lebowitz. Thanks again for listening, and see ya.